you all know that Melbourne is facing a crisis in trying to accommodate the additional people that have been delivered to us. You know it's serious, you wouldn't be here if you didn't think so. Unfortunately, I'm the bearer of bad news. It's going to get worse, and I'm about to tell you why. In essence, it is that the number of people we have to accommodate in Melbourne is increasing rapidly. It's grown by over 25,000 just in the past 3 years, from 105,000, this is 105,000 growth from all sources in 2013-14, to 129,000 in 2016-17. Massive growth in the past 3 years, at a time when most people are aware that we've got a problem, and yet it's getting worse. Now, we also know why this is the case. You can find the statistics I'm about to give you deep within the bowels of the Australian Bureau of Statistics, which may explain why you probably haven't heard them before. But another factor is that there are very few journalists with the wit or the journalistic integrity to go and find and publish these statistics. What we now know is that all of this growth in the past 3 years, all of it is due to increased numbers of migrants. That's the net of all those who are coming in, including overseas and local born, and all those who are leaving. So all of the growth is attributable to net overseas migration. In the year 2016-17, as I just indicated, Melbourne grew by 129,000. Of that 129,000, 83,000 was due to growth in net overseas migration. There was another 36,000 natural increase, and the rest was internal migration. So NOM is absolutely dominating this recent rapid growth. Now, what's the elite reaction to this growth been? Well, in essence, we're being told by the Victorian government, by Fairfax journalists, by the think tanks like the Grattan Institute, Melbourne University planners, we're being told we must live with it. It's inevitable. There's nothing you can do about it. We must adjust to it. And all of these groups simply incorporate the current extraordinarily high growth into their projections, and then they tell us that, look, you just have to get used to it. We're going to have at least another 3 million over the next 30 years. Melbourne's going to grow from 5 million to 8 million. Anyway, they say to us, true, it's a big number, but we can deal with it. And the way we're going to deal with it is we're going to throw literally billions of dollars at rebuilding the city, which we're now observing, of course, with the state Labor government. The other way we're going to deal with it is we're going to eliminate suburbia. We're going to put medium and high density housing in existing suburban areas. Now, that's what they say. They choose, however, to neglect the evidence on this issue, which is that rezoning for higher density doesn't actually work. And we know that from Michael's figures. He showed some years ago that as a result of the dual occupancy changes in zoning in the 90s, there was a huge potential for additional houses, an extra house on each suburban block throughout Melbourne. It hasn't happened. I know you'll be familiar with all those white monsters popping up in Boroondara, but these don't relate to the needs of young people with looking for family-friendly housing. They're too expensive. You can't buy one of these for less than $1 million. And the reason, and this is fundamental to the logic of the advocates, The reason is site costs. The more people, the more demand for housing, the higher the site cost for existing suburban houses rises. And if you increase the opportunity for more housing on the same lot, the site costs go up even further because developers can make more money and therefore they bargain for the existing sites. We've seen what's happened in Sydney, where they are moving to the next step. They're now requiring suburban lots to be available for 3 or more units. Immediately, in the areas this has occurred, site costs have gone up again. It doesn't work, nor does the high-rise so-called solution. You know there are tens of thousands of these being completed. When we checked the 2016 census, what we found was that in the 2 areas with the greatest density, Sydney CBD and South Band, only 5% of all those apartments were occupied by families with children. Well, what are we going to do about it? Well, we've got to deal with high nom. It's not inevitable, and this is the key point. The high levels of nom at present are due to government policy or government non-policy. They're a deliberate consequence of government policy. It's not inevitable. For example, overseas students. It is a fact that the biggest source of growth in nom in Melbourne is overseas students. So there's more overseas students coming in on a student visa each year than are leaving who hold a student visa. Now, okay, we don't object to students coming here for an education. The problem is that once they get here and complete their education, they can stay on more or less forever. Our governments have deliberately encouraged them to do so by providing, as of right, a 2-year stay here with full work rights. Even if your degree is in cultural studies, you can have 2 years here with full work rights. And when you've done that, you could do you can get another student visa, or you can become a tourist, or you can get a working holiday visa, or you can apply for a 457 temporary visa, or you can apply for a permanent entry visa. And as a consequence, a big chunk of overseas students are just spinning out over the years. So we could change that, and it would have a major impact. There are many other areas we could change. I'll just give you 1 or 2 to finish. Have I got a minute or 2? Which you may not know about. Probably heard a lot about regional policy, that maybe will put people in the bush rather than let them stay in Melbourne and Sydney. Well, currently there's a program near 30,000 visas strong for state and regional sponsorship. The problem is that these visas do not require people to actually stay in the states that sponsor them or the regions they sponsor. They very quickly move off and they end up in Sydney and Melbourne. Or consider this, I'll finish on this note, consider our policy on spouses. Now you may say, well, why would one object to people who are here, locals or young people from overseas going off and marrying a spouse? Yeah, and certainly shouldn't abridge that right. But what happens in Australia is you could sponsor a spouse if at the age of 18, and you do not have to show that you have a job or an income which will enable you to sustain that spouse. I'm not kidding you. This is the situation. Compare that with Europe. Most countries now, you've got to be at least 22 before you sponsor a spouse, and you've got to prove that you have the funds to support that spouse. I could go on. There's massive potential to bring down the numbers, and I think that SPA is on the right track. We have to get the numbers down if we're really coming to grips with Melbourne's crisis of overdevelopment. I'll just leave you with one final thought, and that is that at least public opinion is moving in the right direction. As Kathy and I, who's there in the back, discovered with our survey late last year, some 54% of voters now believe that immigration should be reduced. The polls this year are putting the numbers up to in the 60%. So the potential is there, and may I wish SPAR the best in mobilising it.